Husband checks wife's blog after she passes away. He can't stop crying when he found this. The house felt dull and lifeless, like all joy had been drained from it. He felt weak. His head hung low as he walked through their home. His heart was heavy. He couldn't stand to feel this way. How was he supposed to move on from this? He stared at nothing as he thought of all the things they would never get to do together. He didn't want to think about it anymore. But that was when a blinking light caught his attention. Matt had loved Liz since high school, and ever since their first kiss, they'd never been apart. For 10 years, their life had been like a perfect dream. He didn't think he could be happier until she told him they were going to have a baby. But then she started to feel off. Liz kept everyone updated in her blog, but her pregnancy wasn't an easy one. Although she'd always been healthy and active, the pregnancy was taking a toll on her body. She had severe morning sickness, and after a 2-week hospital stay, her pregnancy was classified as high risk. When the big day arrived, Matt's world crumbled around him. What was supposed to be a joyous day quickly turned into a nightmare. The frantic drive to the hospital and rushing here for an emergency C-section was a panicked blur. Sitting by her side for hours was agony rather than a celebration. Instead of tears of joy, he listened to his daughter's wails and his wife flatline. Little Maddie was brought into the world that day, weighing barely 3 pounds 14 ounces. But Matt never imagined the tragic trade-off he'd face. Because Maddie was rushed to the neonatal ICU, Liz had only seen her baby girl briefly. She couldn't wait to hold her, but the doctors ordered 24 hours of bed rest before she was allowed to move. Then tragedy struck. After what seemed like an age, the 24 hours passed and Liz was allowed to go into the neonatal ward to meet Maddie. Excited that they could finally go and bond with their baby, Matt was helping Liz into her wheelchair when she whispered, "I feel lightheaded." Suddenly, she went limp in his arms. Just 27 hours after welcoming their baby into the world, Matt's whole life broke apart. Liz suffered from a rare pulmonary embolism and lost her life. She was just 30 years old. She was never going to hold her baby, Matt recalls tearfully. With his wife suddenly ripped away from him, he didn't know how he could go on. In less than a day, he'd lost the love of his life. Matt sat in a taxi, unable to drive, and barely able to cradle the perfect pink cherub his late wife had brought into the world. Everything felt dull and gray. He could never imagine that something unthinkable was waiting for him at home. Matt was completely and totally overwhelmed. Now he had to raise Maddie and face life on his own. Unbearable grief and pain seared through him and threatened to swallow him whole. He numbly went through the motions, taking care of the newborn as best he could. Little did he know, Liz had left him a final gift. He sat in the darkness and felt his baby girl squirm in his arms. He desperately tried to figure out what to do. More than anything, he wanted to numb the pain, to escape from the world and everything in it. But he suddenly realized that meant his daughter would also be without a father. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a tiny notification light blink on her still-open laptop. She'd spent hours on it, crafting amazing stories and weaving tales that were better than any video or snapshot. For some reason, Matt found himself opening her blog. There were new comments. Matt looked between the screen and his daughter, Maddie. He had a choice. He could fall into sadness, or he could be the father he dreamed of and help what was left of his wife grow up. He rested his hands on the keyboard and opened the blog. It was like his fingers moved on their own. Words and feelings poured out, memories, stories, and musings took shape. Over the next 4 months, he found himself in the same position his wife had been in, addicted to writing. But his gut told him there was more. He pored over the comments old readers had passed on and new ones had offered. They loved her so much, and their kind words made his heart lift a little. And when he finally got to the most recent notes, he couldn't believe his eyes. People wrote in with sympathy and advice for the new father. They loved his thoughts on parenting and the brutal honesty of his struggle. Things took a new and even more astounding turn when the doorbell started to ring like crazy. Matt made the blog his own. renaming it Matt, Liz, and Madeline, Life and Death, all in a 27-hour period. As he read and wrote, he felt the weight of his wife's tragic death begin to lift. Matt's outpouring attracted thousands of readers per day, and the blog would prove to be so meaningful for Maddie further down the road. Matt had created something truly inspiring from the tragedy, and it gave him a new sense of purpose. Parents and other widowers from all over the world rallied to the blog to offer support, love, and share their parenting tips for a single parent. Then the blog took on a life of its own. It was transforming into something so much more than words of support. Gifts from all over the world poured in, everything from diapers to nail clippers. The support was overwhelming and had him in tears nearly every day. It wasn't just gifts, though. People showed their love with money as well, and Matt knew exactly what he wanted to do with it. "I never imagined that people would care about us the way they do," Matt said. He had amassed a loyal readership among his avid supporters and decided to do something more. He decided to do something to honor Liz's memory, and a group of his strongest supporters helped make it happen. Liz had also been a runner, so Matt, along with his town, organized a charity foundation in Liz's name. The Liz Loughlin Foundation began organizing 5K runs and walks in their hometown. Matt gave all the money the foundation raised back to other widowers he met through his blog. When Liz's birthday loomed nearer, Matt decided to do even more. The Liz Loughlin Foundation, which was run by volunteers, held a Celebration of Hope Gala on September 17th, the weekend before Liz would have had her birthday. The event was called 5K Walk, Run, Hope Around the World. Matt had transformed what would have been a painful period into an opportunity to celebrate the time his wife had been alive. But the story doesn't end there. Matt's blog in tribute to his wife became a testament to his resilience during the darkest time of his life. It had given Liz's passing meaning. As years passed, the Liz Loughlin Foundation and cause grew to enormous levels that went well beyond a few simple 5K jogs. Famous people and countless talk shows, including Oprah, began to take notice. Everyone wanted to share Matt's story. However, his little girl and writing were more important than any attention. "In many ways, it's a love letter to Madeline and Liz," Matt explained. "I want Madeline to know that her dad didn't just curl up in a ball and start drinking heavily. I want her to know I was out there doing as much as I could for her and trying to make her as happy as I could." In 2009, Matt took Maddie to India, a place that had always been special to Liz. India was particularly significant because Matt had taken Liz there for their honeymoon. While he was in India, his book, 2 Kisses for Maddie, a memoir of loss and love, took shape. Their journey had already been amazing, but he still couldn't believe what followed. To Matt's surprise, his book became an instant New York bestseller. And in 2016, it caught the attention of none other than Hollywood actor Channing Tatum. Rumors began to circulate that Tatum was going to take on a film adaptation of Matt's book as executive producer and main actor. But what about Matt and Maddie? After Matt's memoir became a best-selling hit, Matt co-authored a children's book called Be Glad Your Dad Is Not an Octopus. The children's book is a G-rated version of the Would You Rather game with stunning illustrations by Jared Chapman. Of course, the book got rave reviews. Although his life had turned into bestseller lists, Hollywood offers, and children's book publications, Matt never forgot why they were there and what was missing. Part of him watched with pride as his girl grew up, but the pain stayed as he watched just how much she looked like Liz. And it wasn't just an appearance. Matt's blog was a tool for him to reach out and ease some of the pain, but it also became an important mental scrapbook for Maddie as she grew up. Maddie turned 10 in 2018, 10 years after her mother's tragic death. Although Maddie only met her mother once, very briefly, she's come to know her through Matt's pictures and stories. For 10 years, Matt's done everything he could to try and surround his daughter with happiness and love and honor the memory of his late wife. His story resonated with so many people that it became a valuable example for others going through loss. Matt picked himself up and made the best out of a terrible situation. Maddie found her own joy in sports and running, always taking part in her mother's charity. Matt shed tears of joy when she took it upon herself to raise money for other causes outside the foundation as well. He knew for certain that somewhere Her mother was looking down on them and smiling.